One day, we will get to talk about a football season where the football is more interesting than the TMZ of the football team. That day will not be today as we soldier on through another offseason. Welcome in. We're happy to have you, Lucas Jackson and me. Until 1 o'clock, 615-737-1045 is the number if you want to jump in there. How we feeling, kids? 24 hours? You had a little time to simmer. If you're like me, you had a little time to blow off some steam.
Yeah. Well, what was that?
What do you mean?
What was that? Like, look, I don't watch primetime. I'm sure you guys do a great job.
That leak after the fact, spineless weasels. What was that?
No. I just want to say, you want to talk about performative.
That was not performative.
I felt a little performative.
I don't think so.
I felt a little. You were real mad for a guy who was very proud to not be a Titans fan.
Who I also wanted fired, by the way.
Yeah, you wanted everybody fired.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
I got a text that you were, quote unquote, crashing out on primetime.
I was. I've been very upset with how this whole thing has gone. I've been very upset for the fact that, it's better than talking about the draft. I don't know. I mean, I didn't want to talk about the draft. So what did you tell me after I thought it would be funny if Malik Willis came in here and beat the Titans? Careful what you wish for.
Yes. Your words were.
Careful what you wish for.
It would be heaven, I believe, were your words. And I said, yeah, you say that.
I said that about drafting Will Levis, too. It would be fun.
Careful what you wish for, indeed.
Then it wasn't. Then it was not. No, I meant every word that I said last night. I believe that anybody who would put that out there, whether they are in the building or no longer in the building, and they have narratives that they want out there about a person who they weren't brave enough to either put their names on it, because there were no names in that particular report, just allegations about behavior. I think that those people are spineless weasels. And I don't know if they're still in the building. I'm not going to source guess on Kaharski. It's not Kaharski's fault for putting it out. That's his prerogative to report on performance issues and help add some more context to how the Titans may have gotten to this point, but I can still believe that those people are weasels.
Yeah, no, a lot of that stuff is weak, right, after the fact. And look, you're seeing that stuff about Gerard Mayo now. After Gerard Mayo gets fired, I mean, I saw this right before we walked in here to do the show. It is a report from The Athletic that after an uncompetitive loss in Arizona, Gerard Mayo, quote-unquote, surprised Patriots execs and coaches when he opted to play cards with players on the plane ride back rather than watch film with assistants. And I don't know if that's true or not, and I'm not on these plane rides, so I don't know if that's a worthy criticism or not, but seeing that stuff come out after the fact feels weak, right? If somebody watching that and kind of taking notes.
Beyond weak. It is spineless.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I am.
When you start to leak to the media after you finally get me fired about all the different performance issues, well, people can probably see the performance issues for themselves on a regular basis. But when you do that, you will also be spineless. I look forward to that in the year 2027.
I already have my statement drafted.
I've been taking notes for years.
It's very defamatory.
Every time I, maybe shut my eyes, it's like I just cannot believe. Again, it's not to allege who I think it is or who I don't think it is that's doing the leaking, because plenty of people jump to conclusions on that, and I have no idea whether those people are still here, whether those people are slighted and felt a certain type of way on the way out the door, because there's plenty of that. What I know about this organization right now is this. I don't trust them until they start to make better decisions, and you can see the evidence of those better decisions being made on the only place where it matters, which is on the football field. I believe that the collaborative thing that they continued to try to, I genuinely believe that they tried a bunch of things that just didn't work, and that they are now dealing with the results of those actions. I believe they tried to make a bunch of different things work, and they didn't. I believe that there is a level of infighting going on between people who are out to get things that they don't like or changes that have been made because maybe you're for one person and not another. But by the way, the Titans have kind of created that circumstance unto themselves with all the different pieces and parts that they've put in place. Okay, here's John Robinson, but now it's Mike Vrabel, but now it's Rand Carthon, but now it's Chad Brinker. Now it's Brian Callahan, all these different things. So you got a bunch of people in that building who are backing different people, different perspectives, different sides of things, which is quite the opposite of collaboration. It, to me, reeks of Game of Thrones.
There is a degree of this that happens in every organization, right? And the question is, how do you come out of it?
Every organization.
Yeah, how do you come out of it? The most dysfunctional organization in football, maybe in all of American sports, were the Houston Texans for a time. Jack Easterby calling shots. Nick Caserio survived it as the GM, one and done. David Culley, one and done. Lovie Smith as the head coach. And then they got the head coaching hire right with D'Amico Ryans, and they got the quarterback right in C.J. Stroud. And they didn't just get the quarterback right, by the way. They got a bunch of other stuff right, drafting Derek Stingley and Will Anderson and all the picks they made to become relevant again. And I bet you some of that dysfunction remains. You know, I don't think that dysfunction just dissipated with the snap of a finger, but they got it right, and they moved out of it. Can the Titans do that? Is where we turn to next.
I don't trust them to do it until they do it.
And that's fair. That's fair. Look, 3 GMs and 2 head coaches in a 2.5-year span is not conducive to success.
What did Mina Kimes say yesterday on television? She just keeps pressing that red button.
Yeah, look, that is not conducive to success. That's obvious. We know that, and I think they know that. They are, for the first time in quite some time, preaching patience. They weren't doing that last offseason. That wasn't the messaging, right? Hey, it's going to take a minute. You know, it's going to take a while to build this thing up. It was, we're checking all the boxes, so on and so forth. Now they are preaching patience, and I think there should be patience, and that's the hardest thing to sell to this fan base that has been nothing but patient. But will they follow through with it? Will they stick with it? Is the question that remains to be seen.
I get what you're saying about the tone that I took last night and why so strong, why right now. I do believe, and I want to emphasize this. I don't know who those people are or where those people are currently employed that leaked that information about Rand Carthon to Kaharski after he was fired and did not have the courage, the stones, the spine, whatever you want to call it, to say those things while he was doing the job and people thought things were going wrong. Wherever they are, whomever they are disgusting. I know Pat McAfee is out there advocating against anonymous sources, and I know I'm somebody who also deals in that level of discussion, right? It's kind of essential to our job. It's to an extent. You can be judicious with what you take seriously, and that's also on us to be discerning as media people. You have to consider where things are coming from and what motivations people might have. And I admit, I'm human. I get caught up in it too. But I am disgusted by whomever took that position for whatever reason, whatever their reasons were, whatever slights they felt they had, real or imagined, whatever justifications they thought they might have. And yeah, okay, it's reporting, but it's still garbage. Garbage. So wherever those people are, whether they're here or not, they need to know that. But the point is, none of it matters if the Titans get it right. And that's now what we turn the page to. Yeah?
That's how this works.
I mean, you get through the outrage, you get through the emotion, you get through all of it. I mean, maybe to an extent, you can continue to hold these things. And like I said, I don't trust them until they do it right. Like, I'm not going to trust them until they do it, like really trust them until they do it right.
And as we move forward, I believe this is the first name that we have seen in terms of an official request. Diana Rossini reports the Tennessee Titans have requested an interview with Chiefs Assistant General Manager Mike Borgonzi.
Okay. So there will be a list put together. We will go through the description of the job that has been put out there. You are welcome to weigh in on it with your opinions. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on Twitch. If you would like, 615-737-1045 is the number if you want to jump in. At this particular point in time, the news of yesterday was the Titans making the change to relieve Rand Carthon of his duties. So now it's Chad Brinker's show, indisputably, by anybody that you talk to. This is Chad Brinker's thing now. What's his vision look like? We'll talk about it next. With these chilly winter temps that are starting to settle in, be sure not to leave your wealth management goals out in the cold. Call Trajan Wealth today because you've asked yourself at some point in your career, maybe you haven't gotten to that point, but you're thinking about it. Will I have enough money when I retire? When should I start to draw from Social Security? If these questions keep you up at night, let me introduce you to the Trajan Wealth team that's there to keep you on the right track. RAJAN Wealth. Trajan Wealth is not just any financial firm. They're your partners in securing your financial future. And they're more than just a fiduciary firm. They're a family-owned, veteran-led team that puts your need first. Let their decades of experience specializing in retirement planning and wealth management continue to work for you. Trajan Wealth offers free consultations to help you develop your plan and your peace of mind. So call them today at 615-270-5000. That's 615-270-5000, or visit them online at TrajanWealth.com. Advisory services offered through Trajan Wealth, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. This is a paid advertisement.
I love living in Middle Tennessee. We've got great restaurants, entertainment, sports, and one of the nation's top Ford dealers right here in our backyard. Two Rivers Ford. Remember that name. Two Rivers has been a staple in our community since 1983. They're locally owned. They have a non-commissioned sales team, and they sell below MSRP. They've been doing business with integrity for decades. Two Rivers Ford, the South's most trusted Ford dealer. I love living in Middle Tennessee. We've got great restaurants, entertainment, sports, and one of the nation's top Ford dealers right here in our backyard. Two Rivers Ford. Remember that name. Two Rivers has been a staple in our community since 1983. They're locally owned. They have a non-commissioned sales team, and they sell below MSRP. They've been doing business with integrity for decades. Two Rivers Ford, the South's most trusted Ford dealer.
Welcome back to the show. We're fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken. So, after they make the decision, or while they make the decision to move on from Ran Carthon, that you could, continue to spend time bitching and moaning, as I spent basically the entire day yesterday doing. At a certain point, you have to move on, because that's what it is. Like, fair or unfair, right, wrong, or indifferent, fall guy or not, they're moving on. And if you care about the progress of the football team, you're trying to understand as much as humanly possible about the direction that they're heading. Again, direction is a word at this point because they've told you about a bunch of different directions that they've headed in basically over the last, 2.5 years, you would say? About 2.5 years.
Yeah. They've had different versions of direction in the last 2 years. Obviously, they've had 3 general managers in the last 2.5 years.
So, I don't know what their direction is. They're telling you now what their new direction is, even though it's not really a new direction because it's basically the same people without Ran Carthon at this point in time. But there is an interview done with Jim Wyatt of TennesseeTitans.com and now the Titans president of football operations / shadow GM last year, Chad Brinker. Did we do the audience a disservice by not talking about that enough? I mean, we talked about it.
Not talking about what enough?
Chad Brinker over Ran Carthon, the promotion, the whole thing.
Oh, when it happened, when it came down? We talked about it. We talked about it in terms of pointing it out in sort of the nebulous nature of it. Like, okay, truly, how does this work? But I don't think there was any question, even though I don't know that anybody ever definitively said that Ran Carthon had final say over the roster. But we have been correct under the impression since Mike Vrabel was fired that there is no question. Ran Carthon, he's making the draft pick. He's the final voice. He's the final determination on this thing.
The roster was under his control last year.
Yes. So because of that, the other questions sort of fall by the wayside in terms of the dynamics of the front office structure. And fair to be confused by it when the general manager who has final say is Ran Carthon, but Chad Brinker is technically his boss.
Okay. So if we did not, for you guys, it's up to you. I mean, you can tell us whether we talked about it or not. That's at your discretion, but we're going to talk about it a lot now because he's the guy that's left, and they're going to look for a new GM. Even though, again, I have no idea why this person doesn't want to be the GM. Like, you got all the power. You got final say. You got roster tiebreakers. Why don't you want the GM? Because this is John Robinson's role without being the GM.
I was going to say, we have the clearest front office pecking order since John Robinson.
Yeah, because this is John's job.
Yes.
This is, by definition, the job that John had, except for what?
The tag of general manager. General manager.
It's interesting. So, quote, in the article, the consistent winning organizations in this league, they have a vision. They have a process that they believe in. This is from Chad Brinker, who spent 13 years with the Green Bay Packers. You know this, before joining the Titans as an assistant general manager and then getting promoted over his general manager. But, okay, that's what they're doing. And they have discipline to execute it. So if the question is, what is our vision? We're going to be a draft and develop organization. This organization, I mean, that is also something that Brian Callahan spoke about at his end-of-season press conference. He did use those specific words. We are trying to be a draft and develop organization. I'm sure that's intentional, that was included in Chad Brinker's vision because they're trying to show alignment at this point in time. And I do happen to believe that those two, in particular, were very much aligned on a lot of these different things. We're going to be a draft and develop organization. What does that mean? Number one, it means we're going to build the core of our roster through the draft, and we're going to be selective in free agency. Would you describe the Titans last year as selective in free agency?
They had a lot of needs. So I think they landed the majority of their biggest swings. Calvin Ridley was the best free agent on the market, not named Mike Evans, and everybody knew Mike Evans was going to remain in Tampa. Lloyd Cushenberry was the best free agent center on the market. L'Jarius Sneed was not a free agent, but he is the best cornerback they could have acquired. So selective in that they took big swings and they landed most of their big swings. So yeah, I would say yes. I mean, just because you spent a ton of money doesn't mean you weren't selective and you're just throwing money at whatever, throwing it at the wall and seeing what sticks.
I guess in terms of like what the fit is. Do you like these players? Are they good players? Have they been good players elsewhere? Will they be good players for you? That, I guess, is how I would determine selective. And there were some things that fit, and there were some things that didn't work out. Number 2, it means we're going to emphasize player development, particularly our young players. And number 3, once those players are developed, we're going to be looking to retain our core performers, our very best, which is not something that John Robinson did very often.
Hardly at all.
Jeff is the only first-round pick that John made that made it to a second contract, right? And John didn't give him the second contract.
Did not give him the second contract.
One would assume that John Robinson would have re-signed Jeff Simmons, but what do I know based on how that whole situation went down, especially.
Yeah, it's hard to say that's a given.
Not a given by any stretch of the imagination. Number 2. Oh, I already read that. So, retain our core performers, our very best. I grew up in the system. It's what I know. It's what I believe in, but it requires patience over panic. All right. Patience over panic, something that would be great if you got that here. I don't know that you will, but it's a nice thing to say. It requires being disciplined people with disciplined thought and disciplined action. But it's also a system that has been proven for over 30 years. And if you wanted to point at the Green Bay Packers system and say, yeah, they do it as well as anybody with a roster that is as young as anybody's right now in professional football, as talented as anybody's in professional football, yeah, that'd be a pretty good thing.
Well, it's the majority of competent, competitive organizations in the NFL. Draft, develop, retain.
Well, it's like competitive over competent, but yeah, I get your point. So, does that mean that they were not disciplined prior to this? Because that's kind of what's being alleged here in not so many words, yeah? I mean, he's not taking out Rand Carthon by name or anything like that, and I happen to think that the both of them got along for a period of time, and then once Brinker was promoted over Rand Carthon, I think there are some difficulties in trying to maneuver the situation, we'll say, which I think has created some strong feelings about Chad Brinker inside that building, which may or may not be fair at this point in time.
Yeah, he says, obviously, we just haven't been good enough. I think it's important we're disciplined in how we make our decisions moving forward. Like we don't stray from our core principles and what we believe in. Say yes to these things, and we say no to these things, and that's sometimes hard to do.
So I guess at the core of this, and we're going to talk about will they be patient later on, but on face value, the vision sounds like what you want it to sound like, right? I take no issues with the vision as articulated. My question is whether they, this time around, even though I think they're, I mean, how did you phrase the poll this morning on who do you hold most responsible for the way that things went sideways last year? How'd you phrase it? On Twitter, at Buck Rising is where you can go to vote on the polls. We'll update them.
Who do you hold most responsible for last year's failures? Rand Carthon, Brian Callahan, or Chad Brinker is what the poll question asks.
What is the voting so far?
What do you think it is?
I feel like a lot of people are going to put it on Callahan today. Am I incorrect in that?
You are correct in that. 53% so far 53%. Say Brian Callahan.
Okay. But again, if Chad Brinker is overseeing all of this, Chad Brinker, to me, is a part of the reason why they were 3-14, even if they were working around, well, Rand's the GM, but is he really the GM? Okay, who's got final say? Well, he's got roster say, but this is how I think we should be doing things versus the way that they were being done at the time, to the point where Amy became dissatisfied with the situation and decided at some point, that was way before they ended up firing this guy, that she wasn't good with the way that things were being done, and then at some point, Chad Brinker earned her trust because of the way that she saw him doing things, or the way that it was reported to her that he was doing things based on the way that based on what she knew.
There were many, many reasons why they went 3-14 last year, right?
But they're all, again, my point yesterday was it's on all of you. It's on each and every one of those people that were in that building, that were brought into that building to turn it around, and failed spectacularly. It's on all of you.
Yeah,
Rand Carthon lost his job yesterday. That, to me, is indicative of, well, did just the one piece here not work? Or is there something else there that you just prefer to kind of push forward with anyway?
There are people that are no longer in the building that bear responsibility. There are people that are currently in the building that bear responsibility. There are players that bear responsibilities. That's just what it is. when it's 3-14. It was a rebuild that wasn't necessarily advertised as a rebuild throughout the course of the offseason.
And
right?
that's their fault.
Yeah, and the fans.
They upsold. By the way, if I had to guess one thing about the future of the Tennessee Titans, I bet they're very quiet in the way that they approach the offseason, the messaging, all these different things around the football team, the promise of the football team, the hope, the vision. Other than saying it, you put it on paper once because fans deserve to know what direction you are trying to head in. And beyond that, let's keep it pretty low here, kids.
Preaching patience at this point in the offseason is already a different tenor than we checked all the boxes, right?
It's the opposite.
It is quite the opposite. So, in a weird way, the Titans found continuity in the most roundabout way possible. This is continuity. This is the front office, just a different person having final say, but Chad Brinker remains, Brian Callahan, the head coach. This is continuity.
And there's a difference between continuity and stability, which maybe they end up being more stable for it. We'll just have to wait and see and find out. But
yeah, stability is not a question we can answer right now on what they're going to be long term.
The optics of it are very difficult for people to wrap their heads around, this looking like a stable organization. Whether or not it ends up being one is the thing that we have to wait to get the answer to.
Yeah, I will also say it's hard to win the optics battle after 3-14.
They don't win anything, especially not the optics battle. They win 3 games.
If you fire everybody, then you're pressing the red button and you're unstable after a 3-14 season. And you're making all these sweeping changes again. If you keep everybody, there are people that are upset. There are people that believe the people in place aren't doing a good enough job because he just went 3-14. If you fire one person from the front office, like they did with Rand Carthon, and continue on with this different structure, bringing in a general manager that won't have final say, there are criticisms there, and it's a bad look. There are no optic wins when you are 3-14. None.
None. Not a one.
The wins on the field, that's the only thing that bring you the wins optically in the PR department.
This was also pointed out to me. The other thing is that all of the things that Chad Brinker is in charge of as a president of football operations are the same things that the VP of football ops all over the league are in charge of, whether it's Catherine Hickman. These are examples that were provided to me. Catherine Hickman in Cleveland, Kelly Klein in Denver, Adam Berry in Philadelphia. They all are basically in Chad's role, except with a VP title, and they report to a general manager, which again bears the question, why aren't you just the GM? Which is not something that anybody Chad Brinker can answer. And he seems to, be pretty steadfast in written word interviews that he's done with the team website at this particular point in time that he is not interested in being the GM. And I'm dying to know why. Why? What makes your job so much different to have that title? Because what it looks like right now is you're hiring not a GM, but you're hiring an assistant GM. And I have no doubt that they're going to have all number of qualified candidates on their list. But realistically, how many people are going to be interested in this job if they don't have the full juice, the most amount of juice that an average general manager in the NFL might have? Because this does not appear to be an average NFL general manager job. Understanding that the scope of these jobs has expanded so much, even in the last, 10 to 15 years, that you do have to have multiple people across multiple fronts. So there's nothing wrong with having assistants there, but that's an assistant GM to a guy that's not the GM. The GM is the assistant to the president of football operations, and I'm trying to figure out here why that's the inverse of most places around the league. Maybe they have a reason.
They've said they want somebody with a scouting background, all ball, all day, was the quote from Chad Brinker. And then this is on Teron Davenport's article on ESPN. Quote, the primary responsibility for that general manager will be overseeing the personnel staff, the coaching staff, setting free agency strategy and the draft strategy, and integrating coaching into the process of all that. That is from Chad Brinker, which sounds a lot like Chad Brinker's role when he was with the Packers as assistant general manager.
Speaking of Catherine I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, when he was in charge of pro and college scouting, when he led strategy for unrestricted free agents and undrafted free agents, advising the general manager and the executive vice president. Sounds similar to what they want in their new GM.
Speaking of Catherine Hickman, who I just brought up, she's interviewing for the Titans GM job, according to Diana. So, again, something to keep in mind there. There are people in the chat alleging that hiring a GM without Brinker being a GM allows that GM that they hire to be a scapegoat if Chad Brinker makes decisions that they want a fall guy for. But at the end of the day, this article, there's never been, again, to Lucas's point, there's never been clearer definition on people's roles, specifically Chad Brinker, who it is being described in here by Titans president and CEO Burke Nihill in this article that Brinker will, quote, break ties with respect to the 53-man roster.
Which at first confused me. Maybe I'm just dumb because when you hear break ties, I almost heard initially like separate from.
Yeah, that's probably a phrasing issue. No, that's a phrasing issue on their part.
He is a tiebreaker.
He's the tiebreaker.
It's quite the opposite. He has final say.
Yeah, he has final say. He is the tiebreaker here. It is him running the show over the football operations. So all things football, and this was also something that Burke Nihill said in interviews yesterday, and you can feel however you want to feel about it as a Titans fan, but Burke has been empowered by Amy Adams Strunk to speak on behalf of Amy Adams Strunk instead of Amy Adams Strunk doing it herself, which take whatever issue with that you want. I feel like I've made my position on that pretty clear. And that Chad speaks for the football side of things. So again, that's all under his purview in his role while they look for a general manager. Quote, I think the general manager position is unique to their respective organizations. This is Brinker now. This particular job, what we'll be looking for is someone who has spent their career as a scout, is a top-flight, top-level evaluator, who has spent the majority of their career projecting college players to the National Football League. They've had a major hand in setting the draft board in preferably a consistent winning organization, and you can see their fingerprints all over the roster. It is someone who wakes up every single day, and the only thing that they think about is building a roster, evaluating players, watching tape, working with the coaching staff, and not just someone who knows how to collect talent, which, to me, maybe it's not intended as a veiled shot. Doesn't that come off as a veiled shot at the last strategy?
Read it again.
It is someone who wakes up every single day, and the only thing that they think about is building a roster, evaluating players, watching tape, working with the coaching staff, and not just someone who knows how to collect talent. I don't know how I'm supposed to view that as anything but a shot, at least the previous strategy, even if it's not intended as an outright shot. It certainly feels like a veiled one. But someone who really understands how to build a team and how all the pieces fit together that I can work with not only in the short term, but building for the future, the long term, and understanding how all of those pieces fit together. If you make a decision here, how it impacts a decision down the road, and really understand the full puzzle. So, again, I'm confused as to why that's different, at least on the onset, of what you had last year. Other than Rand Carthon hadn't done that job before, and then maybe you discover, as Mike Vrabel alleged, and nobody gets to look more right than Mike Vrabel today. Whether or not he ends up being right, nobody gets to look more right than Mike Vrabel does today or yesterday. You hired this person. You had an idea specifically to Rand and Brinker and Robinson and how those different levels of skill sets work, right? Chad's supposed to be the scout guy who's also got a level of data science analytics in his background that's going to work with the relationship side, and we're going to bring in this yin and yang type of situation, and it's going to make it all work and flow very, very well. In a perfect world, it would have. And then it didn't end up working out the way that they thought it would. And those things, why it didn't work out the way that they thought it would, and specific examples of that are alleged after the fact, after Rand Carthon gets fired. Again, nobody brave enough to bring those things up in real time, but whatever.
Again, I understand why you're upset about that. But if you're upset about it, keep the energy when it happens elsewhere around the league and when it just continues to happen.
I think it's disgusting that it happened to Gerard Mayo. I think that Bob Kraft is full of it, as FCC polite as I can be. Primetime's easier for me to just blow a gasket. But I think Bob Kraft saying, no, it's my fault for believing in you, in not so many words, is nonsense. Nonsense. And it happens every year in a variety of different places. And it just so happened that it also happened here. And I think it's spineless and cowardly and weasel-like behavior. And I think that of any other situation where it happens to, because what are you specifically, you referenced earlier the Gerard Mayo thing in the first segment that we did.
Yeah, The Athletic is reporting, and I'll pull it back up, that executives and coaches were surprised when Gerard Mayo opted to play cards with players on the plane ride back rather than watch film with assistants.
Boo-hoo, you losers.
And the quote is, I can't say I've seen that before.
Okay. I like I said last
Which
night.
could be a perfectly fair criticism, right? I'm not on these plane rides.
In real time.
But yes, it is seeing
After
this
the fact,
come out.
it is garbage.
Okay, he's fired now. I'm gonna text somebody this. Like, I can't believe he was playing.
Loser behavior.
In principle, I'm with you. But it's shady stuff. It happens everywhere.
I can't wrap my head around the idea of some weasel where, again, whether they are still there or no longer there, and whatever vendetta they might have had towards Rand Carthon for whatever their motivations were, some weasel sitting there watching him maybe doze off on a team plane and saying, okay, I'm going to remember this. I'm going to remember to put this out there after this guy gets canned.
Again,
garbage.
I'm with you, but for your own sake, it will be exhausting for you to carry that energy and blow a gasket every time this happens around the NFL, because it will continue to happen everywhere.
Okay, but that's not a reason that I shouldn't still be outraged by it. I'm going to be outraged by it every time it happens. It just happened to happen here, and that's why I'm particularly pissed about it, because these things weren't important enough to bring up when he was doing the job that you apparently stopped wanting him to do. You know, I heard as recently as October, there's potentially reasons to believe that it may have transpired prior to October, prior to the first time that I got a text about Amy Adams Strunk not being interested in keeping Rand Carthon around. So, yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong, Lucas, with having that same level of energy. We're just here in Nashville covering this specific team.
Did anything come out about Vrabel after the fact? I'm asking. I don't remember anything
that
like
it was
that.
Hard to work with. Not lazy black man stuff.
No. Yeah, that he's not a hard worker.
Not the racially coded stuff that was in that particular piece.
It's especially gross. But like, what came out about Vrabel after the fact when he was fired here?
That he was hard to work with, that he was overbearing, all the things that we know Mike Vrabel to be. Like, it was that those behaviors were identifiable in Mike anywhere. Like, and I don't necessarily think that. I mean, that's Mike is hard to work with in certain situations, whether it be media or otherwise. These things are known. But anyway, so that's the vision as it's been articulated. They also went on to talk about the level of support given for Brian Callahan, which we can touch on coming up next. We can also take your phone calls, 615-737-1045, the number. I'm Buck Rising. It's 1045 The Zone. Welcome back to the show. We are fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken. 615-737-1045 is the number if you want to jump in. We'd be happy to have you. Henry Schlottman on YouTube says, friggin' Napgate.
Napgate
We
is
got
good.
a Napgate. There's Deflategate, Bountygate. What other gates am I missing? There's another NFL gate, isn't there? Weren't there two Patriots? Deflategate and what? Spygate.
Spygate, yeah.
Spygate, that's what I'm forgetting. Now we have Napgate. Stupid. 615-737-1045 is the number. Rick is up next. Hey, Rick.
Hey, how you doing, guys?
I'm good, buddy.
Anyway, to me, the way I read the stuff that the Titans are putting out there is their concept is to try to take as much minutia off of the GM's shoulders. Now, I would have thought that there would be assistant GMs to do that, but maybe they just want to say, buddy, you are in charge of putting this damn team together and get it right, and don't worry about the other crap. Now, that's one thought. Now, the other thing, how golden do you think that Callahan is? Is he truly golden or just until the next GM shows up?
You mean safe? When you say golden, you mean
Yeah,
safe?
I assume he means safe.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to hang up listening to you guys.
Okay.
That's a fair question. How assigned to Brinker is Brian Callahan and vice versa?
Well, I mean, nobody's assigned to anybody for very long here in recent memory, but maybe this is where, I don't know, maybe this is where they get it right. They get no benefit of the doubt because they tried the J-Rob Vrabel thing. That didn't work. Well, I mean, it worked for a sustained period of time, and then John kind of crashed out. Not kind of. John crashed out, and could Mike Vrabel have saved John Robinson's job? Probably. I don't know. I wasn't privy to those conversations, so I don't know how hard he advocated for or against the timing of John's firing. But tried it with J-Rob and Mike, petered out towards the end after John kind of loses it. Then you go Carthon and Mike. That was never going to work because Mike Vrabel's a stubborn human being, and he wasn't about it. Even though I bet in an honest moment he probably regrets some of the hard line stuff that he took. I don't, we'll never know. God knows he'll never admit it publicly. But that's where he's at. Then Rand Carthon, Brian Callahan, Chad Brinker, Anthony Robinson. They try to put a bunch of different pieces in the mix on all of this, and Rand's the one that doesn't work, and Anthony Robinson is out with him, but the two other guys get to stay. So I don't know how married Chad Brinker is to Brian Callahan and vice versa, because they have tried these marriages before, and, much like the divorce rate in this country, they seem to end pretty soon thereafter. Now, here's what it says in the statement. On Brian Callahan, he was a first-time head coach and a first-time play caller, which, all foreseeable issues. There are some challenges as a first-time head coach, like building a culture, assessing current and future talent, establishing trust and communication, building a high-level staff, creating an alignment from the coaching to the front office to the ownership. On top of that, he was a first-time play caller and first-time head coach. You mentioned that. Brian was one of the hottest candidates last year on the market, and we believe in Brian, and we want to give him the opportunity to grow into the head coach that we think he can be. He knows, and we've talked about it, that it wasn't good enough this year, and I think Brian is really self-reflective in that regard, and he understands that he has to be better, and his staff has to be better, and quite frankly, we all have to be better, including me. We want to give Brian that opportunity to continue to grow. It just takes time to build a program. So, sounds like if Brian Callahan doesn't work out, that it's Callahan first, not Brinker.
It sounds like they are continuing on the path that they initially set out with this entire setup.
Just without Rand.
Without Rand Carthon, with a different person having final say. Again, this is a roundabout way to reach continuity in the front office. Now, the quote yesterday also from Brick Nihill about Rand Carthon, because, the allegation of Mike Vrabel was right. I get that. They said in the statement, Carthon was hired under a different set of circumstances. Now, that's true.
Yep.
That is true. Yep. He was hired to collaborate with Mike Vrabel. And I feel like firing Carthon 2 years after the fact is an admission that circumstance they tried to create with Vrabel and Carthon did not work. That at the end of the day, by definition, that was a mistake. That did not end up helping the franchise because both of those guys are no longer here. Like, I feel like by doing this, that is an admission. Okay, didn't work. Vrabel Carthon, obviously. If it worked, they'd still be here.
But again, I read this statement as it's Chad Brinker making the call on Brian Callahan's job and evaluating Brian Callahan's job, the job that he's going to do moving into the foreseeable future, which means that Brinker over Callahan. If another head in this constant cycle of public or private executions, professional executions, we'll call them, is to continue, there would be Brian Callahan next and not Chad Brinker. Do you agree with that assessment based on the way that this reads? Based on his words?
We can make conclusions and try to predict who would be sort of the next to go.
But yeah, because it's not Amy saying it,
feels
right?
like a futile effort. Yeah.
I don't know. That hints at one of the hottest candidates on the market last year. Believe in Brian. We want to give them the opportunity to grow into the head coach we think he can be. He knows, and we've talked about it, that it wasn't good enough this year. And I think Brian is really self-reflective in that regard. He understands that he has to be better. His staff has to be better. And then there's some accountability. And frankly, we all have to be better.
I see what conclusion you're reaching, but again, I'm just not going to.
It's a conclusion. It's a conclusion.
Yeah.
I will do my best.
It's hard to make these blanket projections.
Well, that's because
clearly this person would be the next to get fired if this happens. I'm not going to do that.
We've been on this constant merry-go-round of hirings and firings over the course of the last 4 years. How many off seasons consecutively have they hired or fired somebody in one of these roles?
It's been in the last 2.5 years. We understand that. They understand that.
3, Jackson?
3 off seasons.
The question is, will this produce continuity? And for it to produce continuity, it has to come with some sort of improvement, you would agree?
It
would have to come with some sort of on-field results.
What is enough improvement for her, though, which is the question that we can't answer. That's the barometer.
That's the big question.
That all of this is set at. And as we said, we'll circle back around to the patience part of this if they're actually going to get the patience that they're preaching that they need, which is a realistic approach, by the way, which is, again, not the same tone that they collectively took last year about where this thing was at this point in time. 615-737-1045 is how you jump in. Let's go to Quentin next. Hey, Quentin.
Hey. Yeah, so I was kind of listening to you guys, and my original question was about the decision-making, kind of what y'all have touched on, how, Amy went and said, Mike Vrabel's going to be the man. He's going to call the decisions. Well, then Vrabel's out. And so then Rand's the man. And now, obviously, we're going to Chad Brinker, and it's his turn. And I feel like that's just, like you said, a carousel that's never going to end. But I guess my other question is, too, is, I'm seeing a lot of videos and a lot of things on the internet now about how Dan Campbell is the man in Detroit and how he just, he's rallied these troops and brought them into the team they've become now over the last 4 years. And I'm just curious, can Brian Callahan be that man? Can he bring that energy and back his players the way that Dan Campbell has? And like I said, I'll let y'all get on it, but yeah, I've had so many questions in the last 24 hours, and since they got rid of Rand, I just kind of wanted to see how y'all weighed in on it. If you thought, can Brian Callahan be that man that Dan Campbell is, or are we just wasting our time for another year waiting for another guy to fire? But yeah, I'll listen to you guys. Thank you.
Thanks for the call. I mean, no, he's never going to be Dan Campbell. But within the purview of who Dan Campbell is, right, those are very, very different human beings. Very different human beings.
Much more in the mold of a Zach Taylor than a Dan Campbell.
Yeah, can he be a good coach? Matt LaFleur is not Dan Campbell. None of us would argue against the idea that Matt LaFleur is not a good, if not great, NFL head coach among, what is currently out there in NFL coaching. Those are very different people. So there's no one set way to do this. It's just, did Brian Callahan do a good enough job? No. How is he going to get better? Well, I don't know. We'll find out. Coming up next, we will dive into your phone calls. We will also continue to talk about Callahan's role in the number 1 overall pick. The coach did give a press conference, and we have some things to recap. I'm Buck Rising. It's 104.5 The Zone.
It is 11:01. Good morning from the 104.5 The Zone studios. I'm Lucas Panzica. The Tennessee Titans made it official on Monday. The team is parting ways with general manager Rand Carthon after 2 years in the role. President of football operations Chad Brinker will lead the search for a new general manager, but will have final say on the 53-man roster. Head coach Brian Callahan will continue in his role. In other NFL news on Tuesday, the Raiders have fired head coach Antonio Pierce after his first full year as the head coach in Vegas, where the Raiders went 4-13. College hoops, number 1 Tennessee had its undefeated start to the year ended at number 8 Florida, a 73-43 rout by the Gators as the Vols dropped to 14-1. For all your foundation repairs and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once and your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
So Titans don't have a new GM, but they've got a de facto GM. That's essentially what Chad Brinker is at this point in time. Welcome in on this Wednesday. We're happy to have you. We'll get to your phone calls here in just a second. Chad Brinker's been in Tennessee for 2 years. Many of you probably didn't know who the hell that, or really didn't know who the hell that person was until yesterday. Assistant general manager is what he was when he got here, hired by Rand Carthon, though those two did not have a personal relationship prior. Now, they have promoted Chad Brinker into the president of football operations, which he was president of football operations over Rand Carthon as executive vice president and general manager last year. Now, they have since shifted back to what was essentially John Robinson's role, with one small exception. Chad Brinker has all the power that John Robinson had without having to have the title or without wanting the title of general manager, which is, again, one of the more confusing parts about this. I don't know if this human being... So does this mean that this human is not obligated to give press conferences? Because I don't know how often president of football operations are giving press conferences in the NFL.
Well, let me ask you this. In San Francisco, there's no question Kyle Shanahan pretty much has final say on that roster. Hell, he basically brought in John Lynch. Mm-hmm. I mean, he introduced John Lynch to the Niners owner. So every team does this differently, and it is more conventional that if the GM doesn't have final say, typically that means that the head coach has final say. There are instances where the head coach. But is it as confusing? You know, is that also confusing that the head coach has final say? Like, I think organizations can give final say to whoever they want. They can define these roles however they want.
It's not about final say. Who am I asking questions of? And are those the people who have the final say on those questions? Is Chad Brinker going to be available? Rand Carthon gave 4 press conferences during his time in Tennessee. Who am I asking the questions of on what direction, on what decisions are made if this person is in this role, but that does not obligate him to have to speak on a regular basis? So is he just going to throw the GM out there and you guys can ask him?
That's fair, and we don't know that yet.
Right.
But the point is every organization does this differently, and it is their prerogative to give final say to whoever they want in that front office.
Sure.
Hell, the Texans gave it to the mad preacher, basically.
Old Jack Easterby. What? We don't talk about how ridiculous that time in Houston Texans history was enough, just for the sake of pointing and laughing at ridiculous things. But my point is accountability. Somebody has to be. We know that Amy is going to be publicly accountable in the sense that she's going to put out a statement. You can react to her statement if you want to. That's the degree of public accountability that you're going to get from Amy Adams Strunk. Whether that's sufficient for you or not, I don't think it is. I get why she doesn't. I don't think she'd make you feel better about things if she stood up there and dealt with all the slings and arrows that Brian Callahan has been having to deal with all year long. I don't think you would feel better about your ownership situation if she had to go through what her coach has to go through 4 times a week. I don't know that. We'll never know. She doesn't do it. But they need to be held to account for their failures and the direction that they are now saying that they are heading in. And I want to know who on a regular basis, which is, again, a question that I assume we'll have answered whenever there's a press conference, if there's ever a press conference at this point in time, who's answering the questions on behalf of the roster? And are those the people that do have the final say on the roster? The most important people involved in the roster decisions.
Yeah, that we will find out in due time. We'll find out during the combine when every general manager speaks.
No,
right?
It's not going to be Chad Brinker at the podium, yeah?
I don't know.
I don't think there's ever been a president of football operations that didn't have GM in the title that did one of those combine press conferences. So again, why is this the track that you're taking? Are you just uncomfortable with media? I mean, it could be as simple as that. There could be anxieties with this that we don't know. I don't necessarily know that that's an acceptable answer, but like that could be a part of it, and they're trying to find ways around it. If Chad Brinker is not the person best equipped to speak on those things, but he is the person best equipped to do all the scouting, the dirty work, the data analytics stuff. Like if he's just a little more stiff at the podium than somebody else might be, who might be more comfortable holding court, i.e. Rand Carthon.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the way that they see this, that the GM is just going to be the front-facing thing, and no, but I'm actually the person who's doing the football stuff here. Again, answers to questions that we don't yet have. They are continuing to interview people at this point in time, or setting up their GM search at this point in time. John Eric Sullivan, Packers Vice President of Player Personnel. Chad Brinker spent 13 years in Green Bay, I add parenthetically. Terrence Gray, Bills Director of Player Personnel. John Spytek, Bucks Assistant General Manager. And then the two that Diana Rossini reported were Vice President of Football Operations and Browns Assistant GM Catherine Hickman. Tennessee Titans have also requested Chiefs Assistant General Manager Mike Borgonzi. So those are now 5 names that you have, and more names will come about. And I'm sure they're going to have a very lengthy list. How many of these people are actually willing to take this job when you're not the guy or the gal necessarily remains to be seen. 615-737-1045 is how you jump in. Let's go to Bobby.
Bobby.
Bobby?
No Bobby.
Go ahead and make your joke.
That's okay. We keep moving.
Great call.
Jackson did it for me.
Tony is next.
What is happening?
Tony.
Hey. Yeah, I feel like the play calling this year was part of the issue, and also player self-discipline. I mean, Brian Callahan is going to be needing more time, but you could really sit in the stadium and see that the debacle in the play calling as a fan.
You mean the debacle of play calling, or what?
What issues specifically did you have with the play calling, Tony?
Yeah, do you have a specific issue?
Well, it was just certain plays that were called that shouldn't have been called. I mean, it's hard to pinpoint specifically which ones were, but I mean, it's pretty obvious that you could tell.
Well, yeah, I mean, the ones that work are the ones that people are okay with, and the ones that don't work are the ones that people are. Listen, play calling is tough to criticize, and honestly, you should bring specific examples if you're gonna go into the play calling stuff, because then we can help you with your analysis, because we've been asking those questions too.
There were points of criticism. The Titans were not a good team in short yardage situations this year, right? Goal line scenarios this year. You think of the Lions game. You think of what other game am I missing that a goal line situation or play calling came into question?
They have an issue with the Bengals. Is that right?
It might have been the Bengals.
I need to go back.
I can't remember exactly, but the Lions game definitely comes to mind.
Sure.
Now, here's to me the biggest reason for the reason for the season, and not the good kind, that the Titans offense was what it was, despite raising its points per game from 2023 to 2024.
The reason for the season.
They were tied for second worst in the NFL in turnover margin. They were tied for first in giveaways with the Giants with 34, and they were second to last in the NFL in turnover plus minus, so point differential on points off turnovers. They were minus 17. So that, to me, is the biggest reason why the Titans went 3-14. We never even had the chance to have the discussion. What was the biggest problem they had on the field in 2024?
Again, it's my question is their tendencies as opposed to the specific play calls. Like, the play calls may be fine in a certain circumstance, but when you have so many opportunities on the goal line, let's say, and you choose to throw it 3 times from the 2-yard line with Tony Pollard on your roster, when Tony Pollard could probably get you the 2 yards, those are fair things to criticize. Now, that's a broader example and not from any one specific game, but that did happen.
Which, by the way, the Texans did that on Sunday, and it was so head-scratching when both Jeffrey Simmons and Tavondre Sweat are on the sideline. They're basically on the inch, and they've got Davis Mills play action, dropping back, looking to pick somebody out in the end zone.
Again, the only play calls that are bad are the ones that don't work, yeah? That's typically how...
That is how that works.
Typically how these things go. Also, we did not get to do Oh No yesterday because of the news, but I really wanted to talk about Davis Mills landing on his neck.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, obviously,
I would have loved
I laughed
to,
because he's okay, and it was just funny because he's built like Gumby.
I would have loved to play that Dan Orlovsky audio with Shannon Sharp on ESPN.
So good. So good. How about Eric?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
No.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you for having me, guys. I'm calling you all the way from Turkey, so bear with me, please. I'm going to try to lay out my idea for you.
60 seconds.
Okay, then. Well, here's my thing. You guys want somebody that's going to, bring this team back into national notoriety, give the fans some hope after all this crap that's been going on behind the scenes, especially going into a new stadium. I say Peyton Manning. Okay, he's got connections to Cali, who, they had an obviously great rapport in Denver, okay? This allows you now, because you got a top 5 who played at the quarterback position, you got the quarterback guru. So this year in the draft, you could, focus on another team area of need, which is edge rusher. Go ahead and draft Abdul Carter. Grab yourself a bridge quarterback. With Brinker, you've got the Green Bay connection.
Oh, we don't give credence for international calls, but I appreciate it.
Peyton Manning's not going to be the general manager of the Tennessee Titans.
Peyton Manning's making money hand over fist running Omaha Productions right now and having way more fun than doing a job with the Tennessee Titans. Again, these jobs have to be attractive.
I'm hoping that's the last time that we say that on here.
No. What do you mean?
It could happen.
Wishful thinking?
Shut up. It could happen. What do you mean it could happen?
Now, I know who Bev Davenport
I was just getting ready to go for
would
it.
want to be the GM of the Titans.
Who's that? Looking at panicking back there.
Oh, he said it's gone?
I love Peyton Manning. I love Peyton Manning.
Oh, the soft one's even better.
Bev, what do you got to do? Anytime you're in trouble. Anytime, anywhere, any place.
I love Peyton Manning.
That's all you got to say.
Didn't save Bev.
And I'm going to keep on loving Peyton Manning.
I love Peyton Manning.
She sure does. We haven't gone to that one in so long. Peyton Manning's not going to work here. But I appreciate the call.
Peyton
Thank
Manning's
you
not going to be a general manager for an NFL franchise.
It could happen. Not out of the. He hasn't said no.
There is a 0.0000001% chance that Peyton Manning is the general manager of the Tennessee Titans.
So you're saying there's a chance.
Although
0.0000001% chance.
there is a bigger chance that one certain legendary NFL coach that just took a college job is being brought up that we could talk about. Plus your Titans calls coming up next that I just saw come across the timeline.
Go. Plenty of people in their feels about the Tennessee Titans, the things that they've been doing, the things that they've been saying. I do hate that man wasted a call from Turkey just to ask us about Peyton Manning being the Titans GM. I hate that for you. But I appreciate the call.
What are the odds that that's the last Peyton Manning GM of the Titans call we get?
0% chance. That is the last call. That I'm willing to definitively say. I will stake my entire professional career on that will not be the last Peyton Manning call we get between now and, I mean, theoretically, they should have a GM in 2 weeks. 2-3 weeks.
Yeah, and we're seeing more and more names start to come down. This is one name that has been brought up a lot, but not one that has reportedly been one the Titans have requested to interview. John Eric Sullivan, the Packers VP of Player Personnel.
That's definitely a name that I just read you not 10 minutes ago.
That they've requested to interview?
Yep.
Who reported that?
What's the Yahoo guy's name?
Jordan Schultz?
Yeah. Is he Yahoo?
He said that's a name to keep an eye on. There's nothing that's been reported about the Titans requesting to interview John Eric Sullivan.
Bleacher Report. Okay, got it.
Yeah, Jordan Schultz said keep an eye on that name, as well as Terrence Gray, Bills Director of Player Personnel. But he hasn't, to our knowledge, been requested for an interview.
Teron Davenport is saying that Reggie McKenzie has also been requested to be interviewed by the Tennessee Titans, so that is something that you can keep an eye on as well.
Former Raiders GM. Speaking of the Raiders.
VFL by extension?
VFL because he played for the University of Tennessee.
Oh, I thought it was just his son.
His son also played for the University of Tennessee. Khalil was a legacy when he committed to Tennessee.
He played at Tennessee.
Tom Pelissero of NFL Network reported just now, multiple NFL teams have inquired about whether legendary coach Bill Belichick would reconsider his move to college football, including the Las Vegas Raiders, whose new minority owner, Tom Brady, spoke recently.
Oh, Tom doesn't want that.
Spoke recently with his old coach about what it would take to make a reunion happen in Vegas.
No.
He says Brady has been in touch with Belichick recently.
Doesn't Tom get to be his boss, though?
As the Raiders, you don't think that sounds appealing to him? As the Raiders weighed the future of head coach Antonio Pierce, who was fired on Tuesday.
This dynasty, and now they're going to bring it back, but do it with Mark Davis's bowl cut?
Sources say Brady believes the situation in Vegas requires a coach of Belichick's expertise and stature to establish a sustainable winning program. That is from Tom Pelissero.
No.
His contract includes a $10 million buyout if he were to leave prior to June 1st from North Carolina.
What does it drop down to after June 1st?
He says it's not entirely clear whether it would apply, though, if he returns to the NFL in the coming weeks. But I'm not sure what the buyout would drop down to.
It drops to $1 million.
$1 million if it's post June 1st.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like
That's a long time to wait to hire your head coach.
Sure. But if that's the thing that you want to do, I mean, it's the Raiders. I don't know. Do whatever they want to do.
By the way, did you see this yesterday? So there are these AI summaries of what the F&M Bank chat is saying.
On the radio show?
YouTube provides AI summaries of the F&M Bank chat on any particular show. Somebody tagged us in this yesterday. The AI summary of the YouTube live stream of the show yesterday. It says, and I quote, viewers in the chat are discussing the firing of Titans GM Rand Carthon and the possibility of Peyton Manning becoming the next GM.
Oh, my God. See, you can't even escape it from AI, much less the phone calls.
I love Peyton Manning.
Not now, Bev. Not now. I love that drop so much. That's from John Curry. Is that Jeremy Pruitt's introductory press conference or John Curry's introductory press conference? That's right.
Or was it Tony Vitello? I think it was John Curry's.
No, it wouldn't have been Tony Vitello.
No, because Curry hired Tony V. Yeah, it was definitely her introducing Curry as the AD.
I love Peyton Manning.
So good. Kevin is next.
How you doing?
I'm good.
Hey, the real question is, if I'm Callahan, I'm not going to put any apples in the basket of Will Levis. Between Will Levis and the special teams unit, they cost Rand Carthon his job. Between those two together, they lost 5 to 6 games, which will really put us at 8-9 and 9-8 record for the season. So with that being said, if you benched him for 2 games and then you put him back in for the last game of the season, and he still made dumb decisions, an accidental touchdown, he was overthrowing people. My question to you guys before I hang up, do you actually think that Will Levis is fixable? And I hang up and listen to where you can just bypass a QB in free agency or the draft, because the bridge is not going to work.
But do you think they really have faith in Will Levis?
No.
You guys have a good day. Thank you.
No, they benched him. That's done. Done and dusted. Like
But Will Levis could turn into a competent NFL
I have no
quarterback.
idea if Will Levis is salvageable,
But probably
this
not gonna
coaching
happen
staff
here.
has said and has told you.
Probably not going to happen here.
Yeah, no, that's not something. Brian Callahan, that's what we talked about. It was like week 2 where Will Levis said, I'm tied to his, something to the effect, and I don't want to, misconstrue his words, but it was something to the effect of, well, he knows that I go as far as he goes, and he goes as far as I go, which, again, I remember coming on here and saying, if I'm Brian Callahan, I am waving my head vigorously, Magic Johnson style. No. That's not how this works, bud. I get the sentiment, but I'm not tied to you.
Yeah, Brian Callahan has an opportunity to have input on who his starting quarterback is going to be in 2025 for the first time.
And they have to get a veteran. They should also probably draft a quarterback at this point in time, or at least give strong consideration. Now, they should do so only after trying to see what other teams might be willing to give up to get that number 1 overall pick. I don't think they have. What are you doing?
I hit the wrong button. Meant to talk back to Jackson.
Just whispering sweet nothings into Jackson's ear, except it goes over the radio. You're lucky you didn't say anything foul.
Fat fingers.
It's not a nice thing to say about Jackson.
Oh, stop.
Oh, that was hurtful. That was just an unnecessary shot.
That was you being mean.
I do it again. Let's go to Michael.
Hey, y'all. So if this franchise really wants to draft and develop, what has Rand done in the draft that makes you feel confident about him making the number 1 overall pick? If we look at his 2 drafts, 2023 was a disaster. He drafted an average guard in the first round. He drafted Will Levis, and we know how that turned out. And then a backup running back in the 3rd round. Last draft, we know Latham looked decent. We still have questions about him. Sweat looked like a good pick, and he had Brownlee. But outside of that, I'm just questioning, if he really had what it takes to make the good draft picks, and if that's the reason that, he ended up being fired, at least part of it. Thanks for taking my call, and I'll listen to y'all.
Got to turn your mic on to talk, bud.
Shut up, idiot. Just tried to talk to Jackson off the air, and then it went over the air.
Man can dish it, but he can't take it. Let it be known.
All right. Rand Carthon got fired for performance. That's what it is. Rand Carthon got fired for performance. Performance across a variety of different fronts. How he went about the scouting process. What his definition of the scouting process was versus what they might have expected it to be based on people that they have worked with previously, i.e., how Chad Brinker might have approached the scouting process, i.e., how John Robinson went about the scouting process. And it doesn't have to be one size fits all here, but Rand Carthon was fired because they did not feel that his method of approaching that specific job based on the level of responsibility that they gave him, including roster control, was going to be sufficient enough to their liking. Now, again, was it reasonable of Amy Adams-Strunk to have those level of expectations based on where this roster was? Those things can be debated. I would say I think she's unrealistic about where this thing is right now and how quickly it's going to take, how quickly they can actually get this thing back off the mat. I think that there's some school of thought to, okay, well, were those things clearly defined for Rand Carthon when he came in here? Because the job around Rand was nebulous the whole way through.
That's where I was going to push back. Like, could you be a little off base in that he was fired more because of how different the scenario, the context of his job is now versus what he was brought in to do, and that is utilize his skill set to work with Mike Vrabel in conjunction with Vrabel.
They moved the goalposts on that job. They changed what the definition of that job is and decided, no, that's not the person to do this job.
Which they essentially said yesterday, right?
No, they did.
Carthon was hired under a different
job.
Under a different set of circumstances.
Right. And based on what they are now seeking, that they did not feel like he was sufficient in doing that version of the job. That's performance.
That if they had gone back, they would not have hired Rand Carthon for this version of the job that they're looking for.
No. But again, you could debate that they shouldn't have hired Rand Carthon for the version of the job that they hired him to do because the coach never wanted him. Tyler is next.
How's it going, guys?
Good.
Hey, I would say hopefully we can trade that first pick to the Raiders and kind of fleece them like Chicago did to Carolina and get a bunch of capital out of that. I'd also look at Hendon Hooker. I think he might be a vulnerable starter, and then I would honestly just keep Will Levis as a backup. And then I may be mistaken, but I think the assistant GM from both Philadelphia and Kansas City are available, and I would look at possibly one of those two guys. And that's all I got, guys. So you all have a good one.
I mean, sure, you'd like to fleece anybody if those opportunities were presented to you, but those things have to be, there has to be some level of common ground on what is an equitable trade for both sides to benefit.
And they have requested an interview with Kansas City assistant GM Mike Borgonzi. To the Levis sticking around thing, we've talked about that on here. You've said you believe it's more likely than not that he is back just because he's under contract. Mm-hmm. I have a harder time seeing that happen.
Well, here's also, because we've gotten a lot of questions about this, and again, more has come out in the last, I would say, 24 hours on this front than ever before. But at least I was told specifically that Ran Carthon would have taken Will Levis if Peter Skoronski had gone before 11. That's something that I was told yesterday. So with Rand being gone and Levis still here, how much does that influence, how quickly they're trying to get him off the roster if that ended up being Ran Carthon's guy?
Again, the head coach and general manager that were in place when Levis was drafted are no longer here.
They're gone.
So I have a hard time
but
seeing a scenario where Will Levis is also
before
yes,
the general manager
I believed
was gone.
that then, and I believe it even more now.
I think that is completely reasonable at this point in time. All right, let's quickly talk about, we don't have to do it quickly. We've got time. We got a little wiggle room to work, and we'll get back to your phone calls here in just a second. But for everything that's going on right now, Brian Callahan believed this to be business as usual when we spoke to him on Monday. This was Brian Callahan when asked about what he believed, what situation he believed he was under with Ran Carthon and Chad Brinker at the time when we spoke to him.
Again, I've been focused solely on the players getting out of the building this week. I know that's all the conjecture out there. Until someone tells me differently, yeah, I do. But again, that's not. I haven't had those conversations with anybody yet. I've been in my office meeting players all morning. So anything else that's out there, I wouldn't be aware of. So other than that, I expect business as usual.
And then it wasn't business as usual. So now Brian Callahan is going to turn his attention to the draft, and this was Brian Callahan on Monday, talking about the idea of now that the season's finally over, he can pour himself into this thing.
There's a lot of, and truth be told, there's a lot of smart people out there that have a jump on this process ahead of me. I haven't spent much time scouting, but I will be pouring every ounce of that into that draft class and seeing what it looks like, what those players look like, what they provide, what their strengths and weaknesses are. The other part of it that's critically important is the person. How do they function? What's their leadership style? What's their mental capacity? What's their nervous system, if you will? How do they function in the game and as a player? Those things are really important, and those don't come until we get a chance to talk to guys and bring them in and go see pro days and all that. So this process is in its infancy. It is very, 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 very early. So to make any proclamations, I think for us at this point on whether a class is good or not, I think is very premature. And we got to do our due diligence on all the players that'll be available to us. And again, the only benefit is there's nobody in front of us, so we get to pick who we like the best, or there's also a lot of other options that go in there as well. But very early on, and there'll be a lot more time to talk about those things as we move forward. Go ahead, Buck. I'll let you go back.
What skill set in that room are you looking to add that you might not otherwise have?
As far as
the quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think we need, we need to turn the ball over less. That's a part of it. Got to take less sacks. That's also a part of it. We got to find a mix between the explosive play rate that we had, which was pretty good as the season went along. We got better there versus the completion part of it. We're still moving the offense. There's a leadership component to it as well. That's important. That you're trying to find a guy that can elevate the rest of the team as well. That's a huge part. sometimes that's with the veteranness because they've played and they have respect. Sometimes you go if it's a young player, they got to learn how to do that. But there's a lot of things about the quarterback position, the play that we got this year that was good. But we need much more of it, and we need more consistency. And I think that's the most critical part is that sort of down to down, game to game consistency and execution, where we don't have the ebbs and flows and lulls and moments of really good execution, and then these moments where we sort of disappeared. And the quarterback plays a large role in a lot of those processes.
Sounds like a reset the board type of situation at the quarterback. And he was, I know Levis wasn't specifically mentioned in there, but he talked about, listen, I've been very honest with Will about, we're definitely bringing in, at the very least, competition for you next year. That's just where it's at. And I think that's good. Set realistic goals, boundaries, expectations for everybody involved in this thing, as opposed to, well, just let it go ahead and walk him on in here, and he's QB1 until you bench him after the Cincinnati Bengals game or in the Cincinnati Bengals game, and then we'll just figure it out with Mason Rudolph and then Will Levis again and Mason Rudolph and all these different things that ended up happening this year. So it's more specific to decision-making, right, in that answer, than it is to necessarily traits.
Yes.
And
which
decision-making can be a trait.
But it stands up with what Brian Callahan, what Zach Taylor wants in a quarterback to run that offense.
Now,
because they just had the traits.
Also, they do.
They had all the traits in the world.
They've got the traits.
Not
and
so
also,
much the decision making.
There was also an additional follow-up in there, Jackson, that I asked him about some of that just being innate, like things that you can't coach, because he clearly was very disappointed in himself for his inability to get Will Levis to be the kind of quarterback that he expects a quarterback to be based on what he believes his level of skill and acumen is to coach the quarterback position. And there is some of this stuff that's just innate. But what he went on to say was, there's 5 guys in the world who can do this at a higher level and can do this way easier, Joe Burrow being one of them, than the vast majority of players. That doesn't mean that there's just 5 guys that can play quarterback at the NFL level. You have to be able to find different ways to make it work. And I would say, Greg Cosell has given me reason to believe that Will Levis is one of those guys, but they didn't necessarily do him any favors with the way that the offense ran last year. Both things can be so. More of your phone calls coming up next. And also, Lucas went through and found coaches and general managers who were hired on the same timeline. How often does it actually happen? We'll talk about it. I'm Buck Rising. It's 104.5 The Zone. Welcome back to the show. We're fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken. So how did you go about this process? Did you just do your own research? How far back did you go? How many different teams did you look at?
Current state of every franchise in the NFL, all 32. We got our crack research staff on it, and by that I mean Jackson.
Oh, God.
And we figured out exactly how many teams have a head coach and general manager on the same timeline. In other words, hired in the same offseason. How many current situations can fall under that category? Because a lot has been made of this. And it's true, the Titans have not really done this in their history, but it got me thinking about how many teams actually do. Because how many times this offseason have we heard they've got to get on the same timeline? They've got to get on the same timeline. Cannot have more of this kind of head coach that's not with his GM that's not with his head coach that were brought in together. How many teams would you guess, before I tell you, have a head coach and general manager that were hired in the same offseason?
Out of 32, I'm going to say there's 4.
8.
Oh, really?
There's 8.
That's more than I thought.
Yeah, it's not that little. How many of those 8 teams do you think are currently in the playoffs?
2.
3.
Okay.
So less than half. 3 of the teams currently in the NFL playoffs have a head coach and GM pairing that were hired in the same offseason. So the teams are Arizona, Buffalo, Carolina, Cleveland, Detroit, the New York Jets, who have yet to hire their head coach and general manager, the Washington Commanders, and the San Francisco 49ers. Now, there are a few of these with a bit of an asterisk. Buffalo hired Sean McDermott and then brought in the general manager who had familiarity with McDermott from their time together in Carolina.
So that's, I mean, I guess it is technically within the same cycle, but not at the same time.
Cleveland
Because
hired...
I think most people think that the way that I think most people think conventionally that you hire a GM, he goes and gets his coach.
the coach.
Yeah.
Cleveland hired Kevin Stefanski and then hired GM Andrew Berry 2 weeks after they hired Kevin Stefanski.
Interesting.
Detroit...
I wonder if that's because coaching candidates go faster. Like you just want to get your coach and then you'll figure out the rest.
Sure. That could be a part of it. More interestingly to me is that the Detroit Lions hired Brad Holmes to be the GM in 2021. 6 days later, they hired Dan Campbell. So am I to think that Brad Holmes was able to launch an entire head coaching search in the matter of 6 days and get the deal done to officially name Dan Campbell 6 days after he was named?
One would expect that a part of getting those jobs is pitching the candidates that you have on your list and
That's
your plan to
very fair.
go about getting them, that it doesn't happen in 6 days.
That's fair. That's fair. And I don't know what prior relationships they would have had. I haven't looked into how their pasts
Imagine
were
just
intertwined.
watching into a general manager interview and be like, all right, what's your plan? Who are you going to get? You're like, well, I don't know. Give me the job first.
Yeah. San Francisco hired Kyle Shanahan.
Mm-hmm.
He introduced John Lynch to the Niners owner, and then the Niners brought in John Lynch. Kyle Shanahan pretty much has final say over the 49ers roster. So only 8 current teams have a head coach and GM pairing that are on the exact same timeline. And you have teams like the Cowboys, where the GM is the owner, right? Jerry Jones. And so that is its sort of own category, own way of doing things.
There are unique situations all over the league. No one I'm not going to say it's the only thing that I agree with from Chad Brinker's statement. I'm very skeptical of the Chad Brinker thing, if I'm being completely honest. Like, I don't know the guy, really. He's definitely not the Rand Carthon personal relationship dude that Rand was very much. And again, ironically enough, that you're the organization that can't make it work with a relationship guy when everybody else had good things to say about him. But like, I'm skeptical of the Brinker thing until we see evidence. And we won't see evidence until next fall that they've done things correctly, right? We won't truly know whether they've done these things correctly or not. And even then, they may have a bit of a broken process, but if they end up hitting on the draft picks, nobody's going to care because they'll be a better football team.
Also, I missed one here. The Chargers. The Chargers are the 9th team to do this. So
but
actually,
they hired Harbaugh first, and then Harbaugh said, give me, is it Joe Ortiz?
Joe Ortiz.
From the Ravens.
Just because a coach and GM weren't hired in the same offseason doesn't mean they're not on the same timeline.
And there's different levels of coaches, right? Jim Harbaugh is not Dan Campbell at the time when they're both being pursued or interviewing for NFL jobs.
Like Joe Shane and Brian Daboll were not hired in the same offseason. They do feel like they're on the same timeline.
Yeah.
Right? They had to put out a statement saying, no, we're retaining both.
So are we going to try this? Are you going to take phone calls?
AG
Luke?
is next.
Hello.
Hey.
Hey, yo. The more I think about it, the more I'm kind of fine with everything a little bit, though, because I don't really believe in the GM coach. They got to be together thing, but like we can't under Vrabel, when Vrabel was here, we went into the season with a tore up offensive line. We can't keep doing that. Like we should have fixed the right tackle and the right side of the line before we went into the season. We got Brinker, we got Callahan. I feel like all we finna be looking for is a great talent evaluator. That's all that's the missing piece right there. I feel like Callahan, an eye head coach, and we gonna see what Brinker do. That's all I got.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wait-and-see type of situation. And like I said, I personally will not trust it until I see evidence that they are worth trusting again, because they have broken that in the past couple of years. And their process in doing that, it may end up being sound. And there's a bunch of information that we're not privy to on how it is that their decision-making process has been and what led it to look as erratic as it has looked, whether it is erratic or not. It would be very easy to jump to those conclusions, as many people are. Certainly, I don't know if you saw the clip that Mina Kimes put up on NFL Live, but she described the Titans ownership situation as erratic from her perspective, looking at, well, who would want that job if you're considering what the track record has been, what the cycle has been here in the last couple of years. It looks erratic. Whether or not it is not something that we have specific details on, yeah?
Yeah, but I'm not going to buy into who wants that job? I get what you're saying, and if there's a candidate out there that...
No, I'm not saying who wants that job. I'm saying people are going to be very skeptical of that job. People will want that job. It's the number one overall pick.
That's what I'm saying, right? It's one of 32, all of those cliches.
Yeah, if I have to put it on a scale of 1 to 10, externally, if I had no knowledge of the Tennessee Titans, other than what this offseason has been, I'd probably look at it and be like, they got the number one overall pick. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd maybe say 4.
And money to spend, right?
Not the most, but they got money.
A clean slate at the quarterback position. Now, if you're a GM candidate that has options to be a general manager with a team where you have final say over roster control, then yeah, the Titans' job is less appealing if that's what you're looking for, because they've said that's not what you're going to get.
And some people may not be looking for that, i.e. Chad Brinker, who just doesn't want to be the GM, but he wants to have the final say.
By the way, he's looking for a talent evaluator. That's what AG said they need to bring in. That's exactly what they're looking for in the next GM, someone who has a career defined by evaluating talent. Let's hear from Brandon.
Why are you fielding the phone calls now? Why am I not?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Hey, Brandon.
So, one thing I want to say, I love y'all's brutal honesty. Second thing is, so what do you guys think about ex-NFL player coming in and being in a personnel role where they could fill in the void of this GM role like John Lynch did? My question is, because you just brought it up a minute ago, Lucas, about John Lynch's after where he got to the GM position. How exactly did he land in that GM position? Because he was an ex-Bug player that went to the 49ers, and then he went to Denver. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, well, he's on TV. Thanks for the call, Brandon. Although, where the hell? This man is caught in a windstorm. John Lynch was on television. He was a Fox personality, Fox commentator. So, he'd been scouting, he'd been talking to a bunch of teams around the league. He'd been talking to a bunch of GMs and coaches. He's obviously been around the game of football his entire life, and they plucked him out of the television booth and said, yeah, this guy knows ball. Let's ride.
Well, he had a relationship with Kyle Shanahan.
Oh, sure.
And he got in Kyle Shanahan's ear when Shanahan was being considered to be the head coach of the Niners and said, hey, think of me when you're looking for a general manager. And, again, Shanahan introduced him to Jed York, and then shortly after was hired as the GM of the 49ers.
Dixie on YouTube says, is that man hanging out of a window while on the phone?
Like a dog. Dixie.
I hope not. Your old friend.
Out of here, Dixie.
What's the last name, Lucas?
Don't worry about it. Oh, and Dixie also removed his or her last name from the F&M Bank chat. I don't appreciate that. After I got by the name.
Do we have that as a drop? We should.
They summarily took the name off after I got as though they...
Since we're reliving
felt
old
bad about
sound
it, I
that
don't know.
makes us feel good about things, I would like to hear Lucas making that grave error. Was I here? I wasn't here.
No. Is that FCC safe? I don't think that's FCC
Well,
safe.
yeah, because the name Dixie is spelled Dixie, and whether or not you took enough time to get out the last name of this person.
Which was? Dixie Normus on the FNM Big Chat says...
Oh, no. He thought he was setting me up. You played yourself. Take another phone call. Take another phone call.
Put the last name back in there, Dixie.
Take another phone call.
I need someone else to get got and wipe my slate clean. Mark is next.
Good morning, gentlemen. So, as far as Callahan being an offensive guy, what do you guys think if we get a veteran quarterback and we draft a wide receiver? Because I know he drafted Jamar Chase, and this receiver from Arizona, my God, this dude got the body, the hands. He is a generational wide receiver.
Don't use the G word. Don't use the G word. Come on, Mark. Don't use the G word.
Man, I looked at this dude.
There's no such thing.
Yes, there
Look
is.
at this guy. Look at this guy. Tell me what his name is, first of all.
T-Mac. Just call him T-Mac.
Tet McMillan.
Just call him T-Mac, Mark. That's what everybody's going to call him throughout the process.
T-Mac.
Everybody go look at this dude on YouTube. He's oh my God. You talk about A.J. Brown times 2. All right? And I'm not exaggerating. So if we get this guy and then build the offensive line up and get the defenses right as well, I think we'd be straight. Because Callahan's good. We get a guy that can evaluate talent.
Thank you for the call. Listen, we got all the time in the world to talk about all the different draft scenarios that you have. Somebody's got to want, because you're not drafting that player number 1 overall. You would want to trade back and get value. So that's also a part of the equation that he left out there. More of your phone calls coming up next. Also, Chad Brinker saying that the Titans need to approach their new vision or their renewed vision with patience. Will they get it? I'm Buck Rising. It's 104.5 The Zone.
It is 12:01. Good afternoon from the 104.5 The Zone Studios. I'm Lucas Panzica. The Tennessee Titans made it official on Monday. The team is parting ways with general manager Ran Carthon. Made it official Tuesday, rather, after 2 years in the role. President of Football Operations Chad Brinker will lead the search for a new GM, but will have final say with the 53-man roster. Head coach Brian Callahan will continue in his role. In terms of names, the Titans have reportedly reached out to request an interview with for the GM position. They are Chiefs assistant GM Mike Borgonzi, Browns assistant GM Kat Raish, and Browns assistant GM Glenn Cook, among others. In other NFL news Tuesday, the Raiders have fired head coach Antonio Pierce after his first full year as the head coach in Vegas and a 4-13 season. For all your foundation repairs and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Show's moving fast, but that's what it looks like when your off season is more entertaining than your football season, and that's exactly the mess that we have found ourselves in at this point. Welcome in, welcome back. Thanks for hanging with Lucas, Jackson, and me. Titans fired Ran Carthon yesterday. We've been taking your thoughts on it for now 2 shows. You are still welcome to participate. 615-737-1045. F&M Bank Chat, live stream the show, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on Twitch, if you are so inclined there. The word patience. Patience and vision. Can we put the C word away, finally? No more C word?
But you're never going to escape the word collaboration, all right? You work in sports. You cover a sports team.
Don't say that. It makes my skin crawl.
Like, we collaborate.
We do not collaborate. We are the least collaborative show on this station.
We're going to find the definition of collaboration.
I want the Urban Dictionary reading.
But first, the one from Oxford. The action of working with someone to produce or create something, which, by definition, despite all of our best efforts, is what we do on this show, is what football teams do, it's what coaching staffs do.
I refuse to acknowledge that this is a collaborative effort.
I understand why you're tired of it, but you're going to have to get over it, because as long as you work in this business, you're going to continue to hear that word run out there in statements by franchises, by organizations.
Would you quit your rambling? I'm trying to hear the Urban Dictionary reading. What do you got?
The idea that everyone can work together and produce something better than they could on their own with less work.
I don't know. I feel like
pretty much the same.
Yeah, I feel like the 3 of us could probably do something better on our own.
Very professional definition by Urban Dictionary.
I was going to say, that's an upset.
It was FCC safe.
Using it in a sentence is,
God.
I hate collaboration.
Ah, yeah!
Did Buck write the Urban?
Yeah!
Submitted by user Buck Rising on December 29th.
I hate it here. I hate it down the street. I hate it everywhere. Get it out of here. I hate collaboration and sportsmanship. It's the C word and the S word.
I have a question. Do NFL front offices and coaching staffs have to work together?
They should. Well, it depends on which organization you're talking about. I mean, yeah, kind of, I guess, but they don't have to. You can run
to have success. Do they have to work together?
To have success, yes.
Yes. Oh, then they have to collaborate. All right. So just get over it.
No, I'm going to say work together. I'm tired of the C word.
Collaborate.
Either way, patience. Are they going to get it? Who's on the clock now? Not just the Titans and the draft pick, but like whose cheeks are feeling a little extra crispy because the hot seat got one of them, but not the rest. This is something that was in a statement to the team's website, TennesseeTitans.com, made by Chad Brinker, who is now the de facto GM, even though he doesn't want the title GM for, again, reasons that are beyond me at this point in time. But in this piece written by Jim Wyatt of TennesseeTitans.com, he went on a variety of different things about what he feels gets organizations to consistently winning in the NFL, and he talked about the vision and the discipline to execute said vision. So, this is a quote. If the question is, what is our vision? We're going to be a draft and develop organization. What does that mean? Number one, it means we're going to build the core of our roster through the draft, and we're going to be selective in free agency. Number two, it means we're going to emphasize player development, particularly our young players. And number three, once those players are developed, we're going to look to retain our core performers, our very best. I grew up in this system. It's what I know. It's what I believe in, but it requires patience over panic. It requires being disciplined people with disciplined thought and disciplined actions, but it's also a system that has been proven for over 30 years. So he's saying, not we checked literally every box, which is what his predecessor, even though I guess it's not technically his predecessor, the last person to have roster control said we literally checked every box before the season began, and then they were a nightmare on a variety of different fronts. And a bunch of trades didn't work. The draft picks, I think, largely panned out this time around, although Will Levis is, very much the one that you could debate the most. And I think there is some sound logic to talking about Tajay Spears as a third-round pick and being a backup running back and Peter Skoronski needing to be better for the 11th overall pick and all these things. Nope. By the way, we didn't really give Skoronski credit down the stretch. He got a lot better this year.
Yep.
Like, he's not an all-pro, he's not a Pro Bowler, whatever, but he got a lot better this year, and that's all that you can ask. Development from a young player. Feel good about Bill Callahan working with J.C. Latham and Peter Skoronski into the future. Yeah?
And if they can address the right tackle spot, which they said they will, then you feel monumentally better about this offensive line going into this upcoming season than you did going into last season.
I don't know what Lloyd Cushenberry's availability
is. He says he'll be ready for training camp, but you wait and see. Achilles.
Everybody says a lot of things. And 8 months out, everybody says a lot of things, respectfully.
Well, the question is, how much improvement in 2025 is enough improvement, results-wise, wins and losses-wise, quarterback play-wise, to continue to exercise that patience?
How many wins is it going to take for her to not hit the panic button again?
But can it be deeper than just wins and losses? And with that said, 3-14 again, and right, you're done. I get that. But
I would hope so.
But what's the difference between 8-9 wins and no real clear path forward in regards to the quarterback, and 6-7 wins and a clear path forward at quarterback a la Bryce Young with the Panthers? Panthers won, 4 games this year?
Yes.
But there's a much better feeling about where they're headed right now because of the second half of the season that Bryce Young had.
They keep talking about results-based business, and they keep bringing up the record. So I'm going to assume that it's more record-focused.
I understand, but I typically think it's deeper than that.
No, I understand, but has it felt deeper than that here in the last couple of years? Because it doesn't feel much deeper than 6-11 is unacceptable. Let's get the other thing. Now it's 3-14.
We can look up the statement, but I'm sure results were brought up when the Panthers fired Frank Reich, and the results weren't very much better in 2024, but Dave Canales is not in trouble. Why? Because Bryce Young played far better down the stretch than we've seen him at any point. There's been tangible improvement
I would
there.
love for it to be what you're describing, which is, okay, reasonable expectations for where a team is based on the roster, but I believe that they have been unreasonable, or she specifically has been unreasonable about her level of expectation, or bought into something that was unreasonable to buy into, that she was sold on where they would be able to get this roster and this football team in 1 year's time. It didn't happen, and she fired people.
No, I know.
Again, I'm just going off what her track record is, and her track record seems to be based more on the actual record than it does on, theoretically, we've got this, we've got that, let's move on.
I am just posing the question. I agree with you. I'm posing the question, how will they measure improvement and progress?
I would love for them to do it the way that you've described. What I've seen her do more often than not is do it based on the record. Go ahead.
How does Nate think they'll do it? Nate? Now my phone's not working.
Oh, my God. What's up, Nate?
This has gone swimmingly.
Hello?
Hey, bud.
Yes, good morning. Sorry, I'm in commute, unfortunately not to a GM job, so, but anyways, I think we need a bridge quarterback desperately to see what we got in our coach, someone that's had success in the NFL, not Mason Rudolph, like a Aaron Rodgers or someone like that. I don't like the guy, but I think he's a vital piece to see if we have a functional team or not. I'm not bought and sold on either of the quarterbacks at the top. We should trade down and get someone in the trenches and just have success in the normal way of doing things.
Thanks for the call.
I appreciate
Listen, you can do a variety of different things. You're not locked into one specific thing. People are now suggesting alternatives for me. Synergy. I think I would hate synergy more than I hate collaboration.
Oh, my goodness.
Synergy feels very corporate.
You're just going to have to get over it.
I'm not. Please. When have you ever known me to get over anything in a reasonable amount of time? Know your teammates. Am I taking a phone calls, or are you taking a phone calls now?
You got to do it.
Oh, my God.
It's not working over here.
He had this grand idea.
Yeah.
He wants to be the one that screens the calls now or fields the calls now, and now his phone doesn't work.
It was
All
your
right.
idea.
No, that was not.
No, that was Jackson's idea.
Anybody but his idea.
We collaborated on the idea.
That is what happened.
Shut up. Philip is next.
Hello, yeah, Buck. I just kind of wonder, since we're still paying Mike Vrabel, why in the world don't we just bring Vrabel back as the GM with the way that they're structuring this GM position as kind of being just player personnel, not necessarily dollars and cents, since Brent is seems to be taking that piece. And we're already paying Vrabel, and I think one of the biggest blunders, personally, that Rand Cawthorn made was firing Vrabel. Obviously, there was an impasse over whether they should take Will Levis.
Well, Rand didn't fire Vrabel. Rand didn't fire Vrabel. Amy Adams Strunk fired Vrabel.
Well, but he let's just say
he wasn't in the room when Mike Vrabel was fired.
All right, fine, but you don't think he was in the conversation?
I'm sure there was a conversation had, and I'm sure she made her decision, which was to fire Mike Vrabel.
Well, right, but at the same time, was that because there was a difference or an impasse, a lack of communication?
It doesn't matter, Philip. He hates you now. He's not coming back here. That's done. It's over. That's no dice.
That's not how football works. You don't create hate.
Do
Everybody
you know that
understands
human
it as a
being
business.
at all? I'm surprised he hasn't told the Patriots to kick rocks for not just doing the Mayo thing last year instead of giving him the job that he actually wanted. Please. Thank you for the call. That's not how football works. These people have huge egos.
No, these people are people, and the relationship side of it matters.
That's not how football works, is what that man said to me. Stop. Let's try Corey.
Yeah. Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, my suggestion is let's be honest about the Tennessee Titans. Before they was the Tennessee Titans, they was the Oilers, and they wasn't doing nothing then, and they ain't doing nothing now. So we need the GM we had. I feel like he was better because he put the 49ers together, or he helped put them together. And look at them now; they're a lot better. But honestly, we need a quarterback, we need an offensive coordinator, and we need some guys that's really, want to play or want to, try to win a championship. Because what we got right now is not enough. And for us to build a new stadium or to want us to help build a new stadium, we ain't winning that. Why would we build another stadium?
Or you're doing it anyway. It's already halfway done. I mean,
exactly. You know what I mean?
Money is the answer to your questions.
Money is
Corey.
the answer to all of your questions. She's going to have WrestleMania. She's going to have monster truck rallies. That thing is going to have so many more events in it every year on a regular basis than just 10 football games. It's got nothing to do. The football part is the ancillary. You can put the home of the Tennessee Titans on the new Nissan Stadium, and the Tennessee Titans take up a fraction of what that stadium is actually going to earn her money on. There are a million different financial reasons that she wouldn't give a damn about that. That's just how that business works. Thank you for the call. Also, yes, the most obvious things in the world that they need better players, as we've been talking about for the better part of 3.5 years, is what they need to do. I would agree.
The AI summary of the F&M Bank chat today.
I can't do the AI anymore.
Viewers are weighing in on the recent firing of head coach Mike Vrabel. Some are agreeing with the decision, while others are viewing it as a mistake.
Ah, yes. Tomorrow will be a calendar year.
The more things change.
God, it's like an X, just still on your mind. Shame on all of you, really. Even though I did the exact same thing last night because that Vrabel Patriots leadership speech was making the rounds, and I said, that's too good.
You talk about your inability to get over things. I don't think you're over Mike Vrabel. I think you go home and pray to the shrine of Mike Vrabel you have in your home every day.
I just miss good football.
Yeah.
I miss
6
good
wins
football.
in 23 games. That was good football.
I miss good football.
That was good
I miss covering
football.
AFC championship games. I miss covering home playoff games. I miss good football.
Give us an I love Mike Vrabel.
See, honestly, I think it's more about Derrick Henry. I think I miss Derrick more than I miss Mike.
Sure. Derek's in the shrine off
Denial is one of the initial stages.
No, there's no denial. I miss good football, and they were better football teams than this lousiness of the last 3.5 years, which also, by the way, includes Mike Vrabel and Derrick Henry. 615-737-1045. More of your phone calls. We'll see if Lucas can get his phone working so he can take them instead of me. I'm Buck Rising. It's 1045 The Zone. The Tennessee Men's Clinic is here to help you with any misconceptions you might have about erectile dysfunction. Lots of men assume that if the pills stop working, they have no other options than irreversible surgery to treat ED. And the sad reality is that if you go to a doctor to get those kinds of treatments, those may be the only protocols that they have in place for you. The Tennessee Men's Clinic is the place that you should reach out to first because they have all manner of protocols in place. They specialize in men's sexual health issues. It's all they do. This makes them the experts in the field. So don't trust your health to an online pharmacy and don't feel like you are out of options. We want you to understand all the options that you have available for you when it comes to that specific kind of treatment. The Tennessee Men's Clinic protocols are patient-centered and customized to your needs. They have treatments for everything from low T to ED, treatments that increase size and stamina and everything else in between. So schedule an appointment online today at TennesseeMen'sClinic.com for their Franklin or Midtown location, or call them 615-208-9090. Welcome back to the show. We are fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken. 615-737-1045 is the number. Chad Brinker is the de facto general manager, even if he doesn't want the general manager title. I mean, that's just how we're going to treat him, right?
Yeah, he has final say.
So when they hire a GM, and there's been a list of candidates that have come out there. Teron also texted me a couple of different names to keep an eye on, which I appreciate. Thank you, TD. On candidates that they'll consider, people who have connections to Chad Brinker, all these different things, but they're hiring an assistant general manager and calling it a GM. So like Chad Brinker is the person that I'm looking at, even if he's not the person out there to field our questions, which I have a sneaking suspicion is not going to be the case. And I'm very disappointed by that, but I'll wait until we see how they're going to play this and what it's going to look like publicly. What do you think, what kind of environment do you think he's walking into the first time that he speaks? Because he's been at press conferences before. He had a weird press conference where it was almost like a teacher and two students, where he was at a podium and Brian Callahan and Rand Carthon were sitting down to the side of him, and he kind of opened up the press conference, and we're looking around like, what the hell are we doing with this guy? Is he going to take questions? And then he didn't take questions. Then he turned it over to the other team.
Right, he turned it over. I get what you're saying, and if I were in your shoes, I would have the same questions and concerns and disappointment if he doesn't take those questions. And there will be fans that will want him to. But if he does the job well and they start winning, I don't care.
Oh,
I could care less, right? If he's at the podium, if he's taking questions.
All this goes away. All this stuff, again, interesting versus important. All the interesting stuff, the intrigue stuff goes away if you just do the thing that we all desperately want you to do. Win football games so that we don't have to talk about all this crap.
I brought up the Texans' dysfunction earlier in the show. And we're not down there. I don't know the ins and outs of all the changes they made to the organization. I know
Other than the Mad Preacher.
They, quote unquote, mutually parted ways with the Mad Preacher, Jack Easterby, in the midst of the 2022 season, I believe. Nick Caserio survived all of that as the general manager. I'm imagining there was holdover, though, and there was dysfunction that carried over from that prior regime, from the David Culley, Lovie Smith saga.
Yeah, it takes a while to get those things under, like, your purview, because you're always dealing with some level of carryover, right?
Yeah,
there
absolutely. You can't clean house in an entire building every time you switch over general manager.
You try to make as minimal changes as absolutely possible because you have this thing is an annual process. Like, it takes a long time to put together these scouting departments, for them to do their research, for them to come together in their meetings, for them to fine-tune their reports, and then you make the change, and overnight you can't just get all these people all at once, expect them to have done all the research if they were scattered to the winds in all manner of different franchises, and then just think it's going to work in your building. That's not how these things are done. It is a process to do that. And again, I think it's created some problems for them because you got factions in that building. You got people who are, we'll call them, old Titans versus new Titans, or whatever the new Titans are trying to be. And the new Titans have been spectacularly unsuccessful. So it's easy to point at them and be like, well, look at these dopes. They don't know what they're doing. This is how it should have been done because this was the way that it was done. And that has created some level of infighting at various levels in the organization, which is a level of dysfunction that they have to work through and they have to sort out. And maybe they're getting closer to being out from under that. But it's been like that for 2.5 years in there.
Is it a coincidence that they've been losing for 2.5 years? Is it a coincidence that started after 7-3 in Thursday Night Football against the Packers?
After 7-3?
You said 2.5 years. That lines up almost exactly with the start of a 7-game losing streak in the midst of the 2022
season. Yeah, because they
had
something in place for 6 years, and then they chopped off one head. And then things started to unravel with the way that they addressed it. Now, the way that they kind of staved that off, so basically 2 years, is because for that half year, Cowden was there. And that's what Mike wanted. Like, Mike Vrabel wanted Ryan Cowden to be the general manager. But they didn't want Mike Vrabel to just have his guy as the general manager because that would essentially be ceding control of the franchise to Mike Vrabel. And that's not something that they wanted to do. Whether they were right for that, whether they were wrong for that, I think there's reasonable arguments to be made on both sides of those things. After the fact, we'll never know the answer because they made the decisions that they did, and now we're in a spot where they've gotten progressively worse over those 2.5 years.
I just think
on the field,
where losing happened, dysfunction follows, and then when winning happens, it dissipates, or it's still there and nobody cares, right?
It can still be there,
yeah,
but people care about it less. 615-737-1045 is the number. How about Dre?
Well,
What's going on, Buck? How y'all doing, man?
We're good.
Good. Man, look, it's been a crazy 48 hours as a Titans fan. And, Buck, I don't want to make you mad with this word collaboration, but I do have a question in regards to it, man. So just bear with me.
Okay.
Now, I've listened to some clips of yours, and I've listened to One Colossal Opinion in regards to what's been going on with the GM firing. And, man, my question for you is, with collaboration, at what point do you think that the collaboration went to you know what? Because if we're looking back at the A.J. Brown trade, that didn't look like collaboration. And it looked like it was a lot of dysfunction since then, man. So I want to know from you, man, where do you think the collaboration that the Titans have been telling us about, just failed? Because it seems like it's been failing for at least a couple of years now.
Oh, sure. Thanks for the call, Dre. John predates the buzzword. They weren't really hammering that message home.
Not until they hired Carthon.
Right. So it never existed.
It was John's show.
Well, no. What I'm saying is, so collaboration started, theoretically, even though collaboration, to your point, people have to work together to have success. Like, these things are everywhere, even if that's the one buzzword that
you're talking about as the company line.
Hammering. As the company line, it was never there because Mike Vrabel didn't want to work with Ray Carthon. And Mike can be petulant. And listen, people made mistakes on a variety of different fronts. Should they have just been completely opposed to keeping John Robinson people, even though those people, by Mike Vrabel's assessment and ultimately their assessment, ended up being more qualified for the job that they were looking for? But they weren't interested. They wanted a fresh perspective, and that can be a correct line of thinking. Like, fresh perspectives can benefit you. If you get stuck in the same line of thinking over and over and over again, and you're not having the same level of success, well, why wouldn't you consider additional perspectives if you believe those to be the correct ones? They ultimately went with Rand Carthon over Ryan Cowden, who Mike wanted, and Monty Ossenfort, who I personally think would have been the best person equipped to do that job. I don't know if Cowden's going to end up being a general manager at any point in his career. He hasn't been yet. He was the interim during his time here. And they did make some personnel decisions that helped at least try and keep this thing afloat, right? When they were bottoming out, 7 straight losses. Like, the Josh Dobbs thing was as about as good a move as they made at any point. And yeah, Dobbs didn't win the games, but he got them way closer than they were with Malik at the time. And obviously Malik has had an ascending trajectory since then, but that's neither here nor there. So no, the collaboration never existed. The buzzword, the company line, never existed as they thought it, because the thing that they tried, the forced marriage that they tried to create, never worked. And there's a variety of different people involved in why it didn't work that way. And then they went about it the next year without Mike and with Callahan, and Callahan's an easier person to get along with. But then, based on their assessment of Rand Carthon and his ability to do the job, or how the parameters of the job changed, how they moved the goalposts on that job that he was hired to do, they then made the decision to put Brinker over him. And while that can still be a quote-unquote collaborative effort, you've created some pretty mixed signals on the dynamics there, right? Especially to the people who work under those two men. So no, I don't ever think it existed in the way that they wanted it to. Again, the intention can be good, but the process to get there had flaws along the way that they never anticipated having to deal with.
And they, until this point, have not had publicly someone with final say that they're willing to say has final say.
This is the first time they've came out, since John.
Since John, right. So I'm talking about in the collaboration era.
Oh, God.
Which is the moment that Ray Carthon was hired. That's what we can call it.
No, right? Why are you making this worse?
You run from it all you want, but that's what it is. This is the first time that they have publicly said, especially in a statement when announcing a move like this, who the tiebreaker, so to speak, is. And that's Chad Brinker.
How about, Ann. Hi, Ann.
Hi, Buck. How are you guys?
Good.
So I have a question, particularly when you have Burke Nihill coming out and making claims and clear statements about the very different job description that Rand was hired into. How do you hire a general manager into a position that is technically what other people would not purvey to be a general manager? How is it that we, one, hired Rand away from director of player personnel to what should have been a promotion? How is that legal within the NFL to do midseason when he may or may not have actually had a promotion in reality based on the statement by Burke Nihill? And how do you hire another GM when you have basically said, yeah, but it's not a GM position?
That Josina Anderson tweet a couple of days ago spoke to that, right? That people in the league are questioning how they've put this thing together. Now, whether or not these things are legal or not by league bylaws, it's just people in the league. What Josina was saying was people in the league are wondering whether the thing that they've put together and how they've put together is within the bounds of what the league expects.
Yeah, which I don't really understand what she's taking issue with. I mean, if anything,
what to me, she didn't say specifically Rooney Rule about this, because they also have to go through a Rooney Rule process, not just because they hired Rand Carthon. There have to be 2 minority candidates that are interviewed to satisfy the Rooney Rule qualifications on that. And that was a process that they went through and ultimately ended up hiring Rand Carthon. And having met Rand Carthon at the League Accelerator program, I think prior to him, interviewing for the job and getting ready for that, that's why Amy made the decision on John, or that's why she said she made the decision on John when she did, because she wanted to be able to attend that situation, meet the most possible candidates, the best possible candidates at that point in time. But there are people who are posing the same question league-wide that Ann just did.
Well, Josina Anderson said that there had been questions around the league as to the dynamic between Carthon and Brinker and who really had final say and where that fell within allowable policies, and that several execs around the league had been asking about this to pertinent league officials. And now she's saying
collusion.
People have been monitoring it closely. And then she says, by the way, the concerns and questions surrounding this had been raised and going on for weeks. Some league sources were wondering and asking, what is the point of having rules or policies that oversee these roles if there's at least an appearance or impression of said rules being potentially skirted? So are you saying that they're talking about the Rooney Rule? Because I don't know what rule, educate me. What rules are there in terms of how clear-cut you have to be and who has final say? If anything, they're more clear-cut now than ever in who has final say.
Yeah, but they have, as a team, they have often run into some issues with the league and the way that the league thinks that they handle the structure
like
of things
what?
Going back. Well, the ownership thing, where they had the meeting on declaring that Amy Adams Strunk needed to be the controlling owner because the league was getting sick and tired of not understanding who the hell the face of the Tennessee Titans was going to be.
After Bud Adams passed away.
So some level of clarity, which is why I think that the statements in this piece are as strong as they are, because they've been getting some grief from the league about how nebulous everything is.
Okay,
and they want to make sure that they're defining these roles optically.
That's ownership. I understand that, but again, tell me, because I don't know.
No, I need to look these up.
Right.
I don't know specifically the rules that are being referenced here. All I saw was the Josina tweet, and I understand that people are trying to poke holes and listen, people do this anytime they think one team is having a competitive advantage over another, or one program's having a competitive advantage over the other, or they do it in college, they do it in the pros. That's what this is. But I don't know specifically the rules that she's referencing, because she's not referencing any specific rules or bylaws, is she? Like, she's not naming any specific thing.
No, she's just talking about league
people
policies.
in the league are asking about, I need to know what policy.
I have never heard of a policy that you have to declare or be, overly definitive in a statement on who has final say. Like, different teams, again, handle it in completely different ways. So yeah, that's where I'm confused on what rules or policies she's talking about. And again, if anything, now
it's a pretty general tweet,
and there's less confusion than there's been in recent years.
Which I think that's done intentionally, because they're not unaware of who is asking the league about what the hell they're doing, because it's been out there for weeks that they were moving on from Rand Carthon, and that they've had this situation where Chad Brinker is essentially a shadow GM.
But it's not against league policy for the person in the general manager role to not have final say on the roster. So that's where I'm confused on what policy she's talking about.
That we know of, for sure. I don't know specifically the rules that she is referencing or trying to reference there. Mark? What you got, Mark?
Hey, guys.
Hey.
Good morning. Hey, so I had season tickets for a few years and decided to not renew them, and waiting for the new stadium to see what goes. They'll take my pennies up, but I've been watching football a long time. I played it a little bit. I'm 66 years old, and I worked in corporate America many years. The point that I'm getting to is, I think for the last decade, the Titans haven't looked at something basic that all corporations in America look at, and that's lessons learned. I don't really think they've looked at lessons learned over the last decade of hiring coaches, GMs, drafting quarterbacks, drafting players. You have to look at these things and see what you've done wrong in the last 10 years and try to build on that. I don't think they've been very good at that. The only thing that I look at is I want to see the Titans put a 500 ball club on the field and compete. So thanks, guys. That's all I got. Thanks.
Thanks for the call, Mark. I mean, ideally, you'd like for them to be better than 500, I assume. But based on what they've been, yeah, you would like them to get back to at least an above-average winning percentage at this point in time. How they seem to make the mistakes have been new, at least in these last 2.5 years, right? They've tried a bunch of different things that haven't worked. Amy's been running this thing for a decade now, 10 years, since she took over as the controlling owner. And for the most part, they've had success in those 10 years. But then they started to make some errors, or they made decisions that ended up being mistakes. Obviously, they didn't identify those mistakes in real time. Now, whether that's on them or not. But these, I mean, I would disagree from learning from old mistakes, because I think the mistakes have been new ones, because these structures have been new. The way that they've tried to implement these things have been new. There's new people involved in this. So I don't know that I'm on the same page as Mark there, but that's okay. Last call for phone calls. If you got them, 615-737-1045 is the number. I'm Buck Rising. It's 1045 The Zone. Last call for phone calls if you got them. 615-737-1045. The number. Let's go to Joe up next. Hey, Joe.
Hey, so as a Titans fan, I'm very grateful for this behavior because this is exact behavior that got the Titans sent to Nashville from the Oilers because she's acting just like her dad, and that's why the Houston would not give her dad a stadium. And fortunately for her, she waited to behave like this after the stadium was already approved. Thank you.
You know, I think there's just more coming out. There's a higher level, and there's more people asking. There's more people poking and prodding. People didn't have a problem with Amy, you know, whether or not she is around all the time. Many people were fine that she wasn't around all the time. Didn't you bring that up earlier? The fact that she was pretty hands-off?
It was the thing, again, this is, again, as we keep coming back to, winning cures literally everything. It was the thing people loved the most about Amy Adams-Strunk. She was present. She is present. She's on the field, and she's taking pictures, signing autographs. She's Miss Amy. She's the team mom, all of those things.
Which, by the way, that's a mistake on the marketing. Like the team mom thing, because that's just such an easy thing to hit them over the head with after the fact.
Not a mistake when they're winning. Again, it's just like all of this stuff can be lumped into winning versus losing. So Amy Adams-Strunk was one of the most popular people in this city because she is not a meddling owner in regards to player acquisition, the draft, personnel. The thing that probably, would you say, the NFL fan bases that most take issue with their owner, probably it comes down to them meddling with, I want that guy. That's my quarterback. You're taking him. I don't care who you like. That's my quarterback. So that is the thing that she got the most praise for.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, she did a good job saving this thing from the depths of hell. And then things have gone wrong since then, and it's fair to criticize those things in two parts. Both things could be true.
Sure.
She did a good job for a long period of time. They have since made mistakes over the last 2.5 years that have resulted in their football team cratering.
And I still think she's not the owner to meddle in player acquisition. We have no evidence.
There's no evidence that
None
that's
whatsoever.
ever been. And I wish that people would stop running with the idea that this was an ownership decision or that had ownership influence. Like, there's nothing quantifiably out there that said anything but the football people were making football decisions. There's just been 4 different people in the last 4 years that had roster control.
There has been turnover with the football
people. So again, the goalposts continue to move. Corey is next.
Hey, guys. So I just want to name off some players here. Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, John O. Smith, Jack Conklin, Elijah Molden, Danico Autry, Christian Fulton. The list can go on. This team has let walk or traded away in the last 2 to 3 years that if we still had this talent, this team would be in a much better position than they are right now. And the backup quarterback for Green Bay, who's escaping my mind at the moment,
Malik. But wait, you were 7-10, and then 6-11 with all those same players you just named.
No, I get that, but those were still building blocks that we had that would still be on this team and help us be in a better position.
Well, no, Derrick Henry wouldn't be on this team because he wanted to go play for the Baltimore Ravens and win. Like, I get what you're trying to say, but it's revisionist history. It's revisionist history. Like, these things happen year over year. You don't get to keep the same players the whole way through. That's just kind of how it goes. I appreciate the call, Corey.
But you can also say there was a period where there just was not enough emphasis on retaining those players. There was an avoidance to give those players long-term deals.
Not within the span of what...
But then we're talking about John Robinson, and we're going back a couple.
I mean, the fact that they didn't give Corey... People were not screaming for Corey Davis to get extended here. People were not screaming for Jack Conklin to get extended here at the time. Like, most people justified John's decisions at the time based on the first-round picks. Now, whether they ended up being right or not, it was all a progression, but that's a very narrow focus for why things look the way that they do right now. Ernie is next.
Good afternoon, guys. Okay, I got 2 things. One, the interim GM, he mentioned some things that they're going to do going forward, and one of them was develop draft picks.
Mm-hmm.
And so are they going to start with the new draft picks, or are they going to start with the current one that needs to be developed, which is Levis? And the second thing is on this firing of Rand Carthon, the way I see it, the problem was the job description was not right. He did what the job description said, and with that, they could have just changed the job description, which they did. Nobody needed to get fired. Just say, hey, it was the bad job description. We fixed it. And they could have just went on and not in a...
Thanks for the call, Ernie. That's 60 seconds. Yeah, they hired one person to do one kind of a job, and then they decided that they wanted to change the parameters of that job and that person was no longer the fit that they wanted. So, I mean, I guess to your point, nobody needed to get fired necessarily, but they decided that was the direction that they wanted to go into. And again, it's her team. She gets to do what she wants. You got any thoughts on your basketball team losing last night? The last undefeated. Woo. The last undefeated.
No
Tennessee
more.
Goes to Florida, loses. I mean, a lid on the basket last night for the Vols.
They, I don't think, hit a three until their 12th attempt, Jackson. I don't know if you... I think they started 0-11, 0-12 from three, 0-4-12.
Why'd you have to lose to Florida?
4 of 29
with
from
the
three on the
allegedly
night.
Creepy coach that has a really good basketball team. I say allegedly.
Yeah, Florida is a good basketball team, and that was a bounce back effort for them after losing to Kentucky.
Big win for Kentucky
in Rupp Arena, and Kentucky bounced back from that loss with a big win. Yes, so the cannibalization of the SEC,
you got there,
has begun. But yeah, just a no-show performance from Tennessee. You're going to get some of those, but man, nothing went right for the Vols yesterday.
Polls?
Presented by Two Rivers Ford, the South's most trusted Ford dealer. Describe the current state of the Titans in one word. Forsyth says disarray. David says insanity. I think this is my favorite from Marty. He just says local. It is factual.
That is true.
The Titans are local.
They are a local team. What one word would you use? I guess we didn't do this exercise today.
You tell me.
Disjointed. Disjointed is what I would say about them right now.
Who do you hold most responsible for last year's failures? Brian Callahan, Rand Carthon, or Chad Brinker? 56%, the majority go with Callahan. The coach, 24.8% say Carthon. Only 18.9% say Brinker.
Who's the most influential figure of those three? Because there's reason to believe it was Chad Brinker.
Did Chad Brinker have final say on the roster?
No, Rand Carthon did.
Do you believe the Titans will be patient with the current front office / coaching structure? 85% say no.
I believe it when I see it. You're welcome to prove me wrong, but it hadn't been the case in the last couple of years.
What is your level of trust in the Titans right now? High, middling, low, or non-existent? 47.7% are going non-existent. 37.2% say low, then middling, and only 2.5% say high.
So low is the second lowest option?
Low is the most. Low is the second. Non-existent has the most votes.
I mean, listen, I don't trust them. They can prove me wrong. I'm down to see what it looks like, and we'll find out the results probably mid-October based on what this football team actually ends up being. And if they get it wrong, then they get it wrong, and we crush them again.
Those are the polls.
That's the show. It's going to do it for us today. We appreciate you guys, as always, for sticking around, for hanging out. We will keep you updated if any more information comes out. And if not, there'll be a primetime show tonight to recap it all. See you then.